Hello class, welcome to another session of ECON 311, Microeconomic Theory 1. This session we're going to look at session 8 and it will cover the theory of cost. And we're going to look at the first aspect of the theory of cost. Next session we will take a look at the second session of the theory of cost. Now, the session overview. Firms cannot produce without incurring a cost. Whatever that you produce, definitely we are going to incur some cost. So in this session, we are going to look at the cost that the firm incurs, the nature of the cost that the firm incurs, and how that affects the production process. The session will also discuss the concept of cost minimization as well as output maximization. And also, we'll look at the input that the firm will demand in order to maximize its output. We will also look at the expansion part of the firm. In other words, we know that for the firm to maximize profits, the firm will first have to minimize costs. And when it minimizes costs and is able to maximize its output, then the firm stands a chance of maximizing its profits. Now, for this session, the outline is as follows. We first look at some basic concepts under cost. That is, we look at the total cost. What is the total cost? What is the fixed cost? And what is the variable cost? We are also going to look at average and marginal costs, and also explicit and implicit costs. Then lastly, we will look at the concept of private and social cost. The next major topic that we will look at will be the dual problem. That is the cost minimization and output maximization problem. So we will try to minimize costs and also try to maximize our output. Then we will look at the input demand function. And lastly, we're going to look at the expansion part of the firm. What are some of the learning outcomes? You must be able to define and distinguish between some basic concepts of cost, and also you must be able to distinguish between the cost minimization and output maximization, and we should also be able to mathematically derive the cost minimization approach. Then also identify the relationship between the short run curves and the long run curves. And we must be able to do this both graphically and using algebra. And also we will be able to understand and explain the expansion part of the firm. The reading list for this session is drawn from the Intermediate Microeconomics by Viren, chapter 22, and also you can look at Microeconomics by Jeffrey Perloff, chapter 7 of that particular book. You can also fall on Nicholson, Water, and Schneider book. That is Microeconomic Theory, Basic Principles and Extensions. Look at chapter 10 of that particular book. Also, you have the session slides, and any other intermediate microeconomic textbook should be helpful in this course or in this session. So with that said, let's start with the basic concept of cost. The first concept we are going to look at is the total cost. This simply refers to the cost that the firm incurs, or when we sum up every cost that a firm uses in production, that type of cost is what we call the total cost of production. And it covers both costs that is incurred on the fixed input and as well as the variable input. Remember, under production, we said that there are two types of input that you can't talk of in the short and the long run. That is fixed and variable input. So the cost that is incurred on the fixed input plus that on the variable input should give you your total cost. Then the next one is the total fixed cost. And the total fixed cost is the total amount that is paid on the fixed input in the short run. In the short run, the fixed input is used by the firm, and the cost that the firm incurs is what we refer to as the total fixed cost. And remember, this fixed cost does not vary with output. It changes. It remains constant irrespective of the output level, because this cost is incurred before production takes place. And it sometimes it is also sometimes referred to as sunk cost, because it cannot be reversed. Then the total variable cost. This cost is a cost that is incurred on the variable input, and this type of cost will vary with output. The higher the output, the higher the total variable cost, all things being equal. So we can use tables to illustrate this concept. So let's assume you have output ranging from 0 to 600, from 0 to 100 to 200 to 300, and so on until we get to 600. And the fixed cost will remain at 6,000 irrespective of the output level. The total variable cost will also be changing, and the total variable cost will be the cost that is incurred on the variable input. So it's from 0 to 4,000 to 6,000, 9,000. When output is at 300, when output is at 600, the total variable cost is 34,000. So you realize that as output increases, the total variable cost also increases. So our total cost in that case is going to be the summation of the fixed cost and that of the variable cost. And that gives us, for the first output, for output of 0, our total cost is 6,000, because our total variable cost is equal to 0 and our total fixed cost is 6,000. So that gives us 6,000. So when output is equal to 0, the total cost is equal to the total fixed cost. We can plot this, and we will have an upward sloping curve for the total variable cost. It starts from 0 and rises when output is increasing. Our total fixed cost remains constant at 6,000, and it is a horizontal line. We can also derive our total cost, and the total cost curve, remember, is going to be the total variable cost plus that of the total fixed cost. So if output is equal to 0, our total cost is equal to the total fixed cost, which is 6,000. So we will start from the total cost, start from the point where the total fixed cost starts from, and that will be our total cost curve. So the total cost curve also rises. It's just an addition, a constant that we are adding to the total variable cost. So at the end of the day, they are going to have the same slope. The next concept we are going to look at happens to be averages. And the first will be the average total cost. And this is the total cost per output. That is the cost that we incur on each output that we produce. On average, that is what we are referring to. And the total fixed cost is the total fixed cost per unit of output. And mathematically, this is defined as the total fixed cost divided by the output that is produced. Then the average variable cost is the total variable cost per output or per unit of the commodity that is produced, and this is also mathematically defined as the total variable cost divided by the total the output or the total output. The next concept to look at is the marginal cost, and this is the additional cost that is due to a unit change in the output that is produced. So when we produce an additional unit of the commodity, the additional cost that we incur is what we are referring to as a marginal cost. In other words, this marginal cost will add to subsequent the previous total cost, and that gives us the current total cost. And it measures the rate of change in total cost as a result of a change in output. But then, remember we said that the total variable cost plus the total fixed cost gives you total cost. And we said that in adding the total fixed cost to the total variable cost, all that we are doing is adding a constant to a variable cost. and that gives us our total cost. So that means that the rate of change in the total variable cost must be equal to the rate of change in the total cost, and this also is the marginal cost. So if you see the table below, we are saying our marginal cost over here is the same as the change in total cost with respect to output, and it is equal to the change in total variable cost with respect to output as well. Okay, that is your marginal cost. So when you have the total cost, we can use both change in total cost and change in total variable cost as a measure of the marginal cost, just as we see over here. And for the when you have fixed cost, the marginal cost when it comes to the fixed cost is equal to 0 because the change in total fixed cost is equal to what? 0. And taking that with respect to our output gives you 0. Note that the total fixed cost is constant irrespective of the output level. Hence, an increase in the total cost is as a result of changes in the total variable cost. Hence, that is why we are saying the slope of the total cost is the same as the slope of the total variable cost. More or less, we are saying that the rate of change in total cost and that of total variable cost is the marginal cost. So the marginal cost measures the rate of change in these two concepts or two variables. That's total cost and total variable cost. Mathematically, our total cost is equal to our total fixed cost plus our total variable cost. Then when it comes to the average cost, our total cost divided by output will be equal to the total variable cost divided by output plus the total fixed cost divided by output. That will mean that the total variable cost divided by output is the same as our average variable cost, and our total fixed cost divided by our output also gives us total average fixed cost, meaning that the average variable cost plus the average fixed cost should give you your average cost. And the next one is, and we see that below, that our total fixed cost divided by output is equal to the fixed cost, average fixed cost, then and the average variable cost is equal to your total variable cost divided by that of output. So when I sum the two, that is average fixed cost and that of average variable cost, I should get my average cost. In some books, the average cost is referred to as the average total cost. Now, the marginal cost is the same as the change in total cost divided by the change in output, and it's the same as the change in total variable cost divided by the change in output. Now, the average variable cost curve is U-shaped, and that is what we see. So we measure the vertical axis is measuring the cost curves, that is average cost, average variable cost, marginal cost, and average fixed cost. And the horizontal axis measures output. It is U-shaped, it falls, reaches a minimum point, and starts to what? Rise. And the average total cost curve also is U-shaped, but the average total cost curve lies above the average variable cost curve. So in other words, when the two curves are declining, the average variable cost curve reaches its minimum point first, and before the average total cost curve does. But then the average fixed cost declines throughout, because what we have is we are dividing a constant by a changing output. An output that is changing, so as the output increases, our average fixed cost declines. This will decline until it gets to a point it will be very, very close to the horizontal axis, but will never touch the horizontal axis. In the case of the marginal cost curve, it is also U-shaped. It falls, reaches its minimum point, and starts to rise. But when the marginal cost curve is rising, it cuts both the AVC and the ATC at their minimum point. And this, I believe you saw this last academic year when you did microeconomics. So these are some observations that we make. When the marginal cost curve is equal to the AVC is at its minimum point. When the marginal cost curve is less than the AVC is falling, and when the marginal cost is greater than the AVC is rising. This relationship between the MC and the AVC also holds for the MC and the AC. And as we've seen, the fixed cost, the average fixed cost declines throughout. And that we also realize that we also know that the addition of the AVC and the AFC gives you your average cost curve. Now, one thing that we should note is we've looked at production in the previous session. Now, the product curves and the cost curves are related. Remember that the product curves were N-shaped. Now we are seeing that the cost curves are U-shaped. Okay. And these are directly related to one another. The average product curve and the marginal product curve are inversely related to the average variable cost curve and the marginal cost curve respectively. Okay. So that means that the marginal product curve is directly related to your marginal cost curve, and the average product cost curve is indirectly related to the average variable cost curve. Now, other concept that we want to look at is the various types of costs that we have in economics. We have explicit cost, which is the outlay made by firms when they purchase the factor of production or the input that are used in the production process. And this is what normally this is what we refer to as the accountant's cost. Okay. For example, the payment for raw materials, utilities, the rent that we pay labor, we pay for capital. So these are the costs that we are referring to as explicit costs. Then we have implicit cost. These are imputed costs of self-employed factors of production. The economists are guided by the concept of opportunity cost in evaluating implicit cost. We know that, for example, when you buy a machine or an equipment, you can either rent this equipment out rather than using the equipment. And in using this equipment, there is a cost. That is the opportunity cost. So, example of implicit cost that we can talk about is the wage of entrepreneur. Had he worked for another firm, what will have been the wage that we're going to pay this entrepreneur? Okay, so that is an example of an implicit cost. Then we also have private costs and also social costs. Private costs are costs that are incurred by the firm for the usage of inputs. And social costs are costs that are incurred by society or the entire society.